Alriyami are new to our speakers at the forum, so we really welcome Ali. Let's kick off this morning with Matt Stanley, Director of Star Fuels at sitting in Dubai. Matt, a turbulent week in so many ways, the sort of whole drama of OPEC Plus failing to reach an agreement, and that sort of followed through to the markets yesterday where we saw a real sort of bearish moment. Maybe this isn't great news after all, vis-a-vis great news for the price. Your thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, not much to talk about, right? I mean, it's been one of those weeks where it has literally, you know, just go back to last year and remember talking to you after that historic agreement was reached with OPEC Plus and their new friends, and 10 million barrels of production was kept off the sidelines, and everyone went into this agreement full of hope, and its discipline has been extraordinary. The issue was always going to be how do people come out of it? And Robin said yesterday on your forum that perhaps this has been brewing for a while. Mike echoed the same thing, that the quotas were rushed. And now, obviously, the flat price has got to the point, $75 a barrel. Demand is returning. Look, someone was got to say something. I personally, my opinion, I commend what Al-Masri has said. I think that it's a brave decision. Business conditions are not always dancing around a maypole holding hands. It's a harsh environment, especially in the oil world. And this conversation did have to happen. My personal view is I think that we won't see anything for a while. I don't think we'll really hear or see anything until next week. But my inkling is that I think Saudis may cushion any increases from other members, the likes of Kazakhstan, Nigeria, Algeria, etc., and especially the UAE. So I think that will be the mitigant. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens.
Let's welcome from Singapore, Kevin Wright, lead analyst for APAC for Kpler. Kevin, what does this little spat look like from the point of view in Asia, given obviously it's come with some concerns that prices could surge even higher? We saw that as an initial reaction, but then they came off.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting one. I was trying to get a sort of Asian perspective on it earlier by looking at what's happening in China, because there's a lot of noise about Chinese refining margins potentially coming under pressure. They already are under pressure because of weak gas, oil, and jet margins, or cracks in particular. But looking at sort of the import levels into China, we're actually seeing relatively stable numbers around 9.6, 9.7 million barrels per day. So as Matt says, an awful lot of oil has been taken off the market for the last year and a half, or year and 3 months, or whatever. So this is not a new sort of situation, but the development, the evolution that we're seeing at the moment in this spat, and it's not just oil, it's tariffs around, Emirati goods and products and so on. It's not going away. And as Matt just said a moment ago, you have to admire the bravery, the boldness of the Dubai minister to say, actually, the numbers weren't fair. We need to readdress, the quotas that we were given, because the baseline used was not equitable for all partners.
Did you get any sense in your conversations in Asia, Kevin, that there is an urgency around this post-April piece? I mean, there seems to be consensus in OPEC Plus to move ahead with an increase from August, which is the more immediate responsibility of the group. But the urgency or the need to address the post-April period, is that something that people are sort of sitting on the edge of their seats for at this moment?
I think so, yeah. I mean, the whole world is looking at Brent up in the high 70s and wondering whether or not Goldman Sachs and UBS are going to be right, saying that the next price point is 80, right? So refiners in this region in particular, and traders as well, of course, are looking at the uncertainty. They're looking at the raised volatility. And the biggest indicator of where we're going to go is this current spat between the UAE and Saudi. Once that gets resolved, and I do think it will get resolved, I think ultimately prudence and wisdom will come to the fore. But until that gets resolved, we're going to see the volatility continue.
It certainly seems to be unprecedented times in multiple ways. Let's welcome to the table Ali Alriyami, consultant and former Director General of Marketing at the Ministry of Energy and Minerals in Oman, recently retired. So finally, Ali is free to tell us all the deep, dark secrets Ali, welcome to the table. I suppose a simple question to start with. How serious a disagreement do you think this is for the OPEC plus group? Of course, Oman is one of those countries that has been connected to this very large 20 plus countries managing supply.
I have to be careful when I talk to you, Sean, but I'll try to be more open this time than before. Anyway, I think before we go to your question, I think the market during the last week's saga overreacted basically, and now what we see now, the drop yesterday and today on price is just the market now starting to reflect the reality rather than the last week discussion and that these those an agreement haven't been reached and so on. But I think going forward, I believe that this is just a time that the countries need some more, time to go back to their superiors and to go to the governments and to maybe to come up with a new different positions. I think next week maybe or a week after, as soon as that this OPEC plus will come back again. And I hope that we will have a meeting and we will have an agreement. My worry is that is to go back to last year's problems and saga, where we disagree on certain issues, and then we end up dumping the market with a lot of oil, and the price went down to 30s and 25. That is really my worry. But if we are going to continue like this, no agreement, no deal, we continue with the same cuts that we have at the moment, then I think 70 to 75 is the way forward. I don't see any fundamentals in the market suggest otherwise. But I really hope that the OPEC plus countries will be back to the meeting, maybe hopefully inshallah 1 week or 2 weeks from now.
Ali,
But by the way, Sean, this is the only hope that we have. We don't have any other solution. Without OPEC plus agreement, then the problem will be huge, and we will not really be in a position to afford to have any kind of issues in the future.
Matt, I mean, taking up that point, without the OPEC plus agreement, I mean, ultimately we had the Saudi OSPs yesterday. They've declared their nominations for August. August is done from the point of view, the window is just about passed. We've got the Eid holidays coming up next week, which of course in Saudi Arabia and most of the Middle East is particularly Saudi Arabia, it's a very big holiday, long holiday. So adding all the sort of swings and roundabouts here, we're at August 1st again, and really it's hard to see any resolution before the next sort of scheduled monthly OPEC plus meeting.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, Ali, go on. No, finish, because I know that.
No. Go ahead, please.
No, I think Ali's absolutely right. It's the one hope is that they do get together. The market needs to be managed, and I dismiss any rumors about the group breaking up. Arguably, the cartel has never been stronger. They hold all the cards on their chest, and that's clear. There's a question regarding integrity and looking at their preferred off-takers. Take India, for example. They just bought a couple of cargoes from Guyana. They are looking to source barrels elsewhere, because when flat price gets to 75, market share may become a problem if they continue to keep a supply off the market. So look, I think that there will be a resolution.
Was there anything, Matt, yesterday in the OSPs for Saudi that gave you, that you would read the tea leaves on?
Not really. It was, I was trying to find if the UAE had, ADNOC had sent the Upper Zakum OSPs, because they were kind of coming out at the same time, the rumors on the market regarding the UAE and Saudi. No, look, I mean, the problem that they've got is refining margins are flat, and barrels are available. There are no shortages of barrels in the market. As Kev touched on, refining margins are still, apart from the US, globally are looking weak. But just to touch on the point, one story I found really interesting yesterday was when the White House spoke up regarding what OPEC were going to do. And I'm quoting it, they said, "We're encouraged by the ongoing conversation by OPEC members to reaching an agreement which will promote access to affordable energy." Now, it's that affordable part I found particularly interesting, because $75 a barrel, flat price rallying 40% since the start of January, does not do well for the inflation argument, and gasoline prices are up 40% the same. So I wonder if there is something behind it all.
I think that's just domestic politics in America. That's going out of the 6 o'clock news. The word affordable energy is the soundbite that Middle America likes to hear. Kevin, looking at that point Matt raises, the refinery margins, what their outlook is, regardless of this current moment, and how it could impact that.
Yeah, it's I come back to the point I made a few moments ago, and that's that specifically in Asia, we've got a real problem with the fact that you've got such a middle distillate heavy balance. Effectively, you've got so much gas oil and jet output that refining margins will come under pressure. Turning to the other side of the world, however, looking at the US, I mean, gasoline cracks this year have hit $25 a barrel, which is the highest for several years. Now they're not quite there now, because I think the market started to cool off ever so slightly when retail prices got over $3 and got into the $3.50 a gallon kind of level. But margins in the US have been supported. Margins in Asia are going to continue to struggle, and I think that's going to be the case for Europe as well. And the reason I say that is that if you've got a situation where you've got the complexity and you've got the scale of the refineries that have been built in Asia in the last 10 or 20 years, and you compare that with the complexity and scale of refineries around the Med and around Northwest Europe, you're going to see margins in Europe coming under pressure much more quickly, and therefore run rates getting trimmed. And Asian refineries generally, which are set up in many countries like Korea, for example, and to a large extent China, they're set up as merchant refiners. West Coast India the same. So they're going to try and carry on running as long as they can, but that's going to ultimately pressurize especially distillate margins around the world.
Ali, the big question that you're obviously pointing towards, and the market is certainly starting to ask itself after the initial sort of, oh gosh, this is a bullish moment, and then the sobering up yesterday of, well, maybe this is not a bullish moment and everybody might go for a free-for-all. Your thoughts on OPEC plus countries maintaining the discipline of production levels without the agreement? How long could that last?
Well, the thing is that we have to buy on this agreement. We have to go through this agreement to the end. And what I mean to the end is March next year. Without this agreement, then the market or the DOC, Declaration of Coordination, will collapse. And once collapse, then we will end up having the same problem that we had last year. And nobody wants to go to the same problem that we had last year. Never. Not Saudi Arabia, not Russia, not UAE. So I think the only chance we have is to stick to this agreement to the end. Is there
anything at the moment that is necessitating? I mean, the Saudi position is, let's talk about post-April and get it done now. The UAE is saying, no, let's separate the two. Is there anything urgent that needs to address get agreement on post-April? I don't see it in the market. Do you see anything that gives this an urgent now requirement?
That is exactly the thing. I don't see any problem. Basically, both ministers, they are right. You see, if you see UAE's point of view, you tend to agree with them. And also, if you go and see His Royal Highness point of view and Saudi Arabia and others, including Oman, it also does make sense. So it is just a matter of sitting in closed doors and take our guns and shoot to each other and not to go to the media with a wrong message. Yeah, this is what happens all the time. We have this disagreement all the time during the meeting, during OPEC plus meetings. But the only difference this time that the news went out to the media, and the ministers start talking about it through the media, and this is what created the saga. But the difference is there always been differences. We always shout to each other. but we end up with an agreement. So the
In
only
terms
chance I
of
have
the
at the moment,
idea, Ali, in terms of the idea of the sort of quota or the baseline from which these cuts were made, do you think there's many countries that would be also looking for an adjustment, or is the UAE sort of by itself in that request?
it wasn't an issue before. Since we agree on 2018 to use October as baseline, we haven't had any problems. Not from Oman, not from Saudi Arabia, not from UAE. So why do you want to bring this issue now? I mean, we just need to continue to the end, and maybe the position of other 22 countries that maybe we don't want to shock the market, and let's take it gradually until end of the year. It does make sense. But again, why do you want to destroy something that it was working? It was giving us the right results. It gave us the good prices, if I can say so.
Of course,
but, again, I mean,
health back to most producing countries.
Exactly. So I think it's just a matter of time, and this guy will come back again to the round table, and we will start really debating in good faith and come up with a good recommendation, either to change the baseline or to continue until December 2022. But we cannot survive, Sean, without this agreement.
Matt, the second half of the year, obviously we're just a week into it, and stocks were already expected to continue to draw below the 5-year average even without this development. Where do you see that going now, if we're going to have this drag out for at least a month, the impact on global inventories?
Well, I mean, I think, look, demand is coming back. Domestic demand especially is surging, obviously. There's a couple of things. Yeah, look, stocks will continue to draw heavily, and that's why I was quite surprised that with no headline regarding that more oil is coming back into the market, because we still haven't had that confirmed, that flat price didn't pop up to $80 a barrel. So the other concern you've got on the other side of the coin, though, is His Excellency Sultan Al Jaber, the CEO of ADNOC, in CERAWeek in February, he saw that all demand pre-pandemic would come back by the end of the year. Now, I was skeptical about that, and I don't see that happening. The main reason being because international travel is not going to happen. So there's still sort of 2 million barrels a day of jet demand that I don't see returning until possibly this time next year, maybe Q2 next year. So look, if there's no oil brought back into the market August to December, then further production put back into the market, stocks will draw, and they will draw heavily. And as Kev said, okay, refining margins are struggling outside of the US, but it's all eyes on the US. And it was especially this week's EIA data, because it was 4th of July weekend, that will really prove that should be the catalyst to really get that second half demand wheel turning. So I think next week we will see that, because they go Friday to Friday of the previous week. So I think EIA is going to be really key in July to see how the US are faring regarding driving.
Kevin, the flip side of that, a US demand outlook, which is clearly robust, whatever way you look at it, the China picture is still a little bit sort of starting to be, a little bit uncertain. What is your wisdom into China demand second half?
There's actually a nice sort of segue between the point that Matt makes around US recovery and some of the activity that I've actually seen from some of my own colleagues in China over the last couple of weeks. They've started doing it face-to-face, in-person meetings over the last few months. One of my colleagues who's based in Shanghai is flying to Beijing on a commercial flight, and it's full. So that tells you that demand is coming back. That recovery is really there. And it's within countries, right? So it's going to be national domestic growth or domestic recovery rather than international. So the impact on jet fuel in particular is still going to be there globally, but certainly locally, people are going to start flying again. And China is a very good example of that. So I think the second half, we'll see that demand, continue to grow.
What about the curtail of the Chinese government onto independent refiners, that sort of structural oil market management that has been ongoing for a few months?
Yeah, there was a very interesting tax change just recently on light cycle oil that was being imported into China and effectively blended into the diesel pool and sold domestically. And that was actually allowing the Chinese refiners, especially the independents, to increase their exports, to increase their surpluses of diesel and take advantage of international prices. And the Chinese government actually turned around and slapped a huge levy on that to basically make it as expensive, LCO, light cycle oil, to import as finished grade gas oil. That's going to have a big impact, I think, on the balances in Asia, as well as just in China. Because if all of a sudden that LCO flow that was going from Korea in particular to the Chinese refineries, that suddenly stops, you lose the surpluses, therefore, it starts to be a bit more supportive. I talked about gas oil margins being very weak at the moment, but perhaps this is the bright spark for gas oil margins, i.e. less surplus in the region, therefore there's headroom for them to recover.
Let's go to the survey question to give everybody else a chance to express their views on this topic. Do you expect OPEC plus countries to unilaterally supply more oil in August if the group fails to reach an official agreement? So that's ultimately the big question. Is there a risk that we're going to basically all resort to pump what we can, what we want, if an agreement, or indeed maybe the 400,000 gets adhered to regardless? What's the view in the room that if this drags on, that we're going to see unilateral production? Ali, looking forward in the context of the week that's in it, obviously we're halfway through the trading week. It's kind of a week, it's a whole week now since OPEC Plus first came, the JMMC that was postponed for a day last week. The first signs that this problem was emanating now a week later, there's silence, and there does appear to be no actual negotiations, quote unquote, going on at this point. Without that official structure, where does this go? And do you feel there is an urgency to resolve it?
I think there is. We need, like I said, to agree and to come up with few solutions, or to ask some few countries to interfere, like it always happens. Russia plays a big role on this, to bring everybody to the table again. From the outside of OPEC. Saudi Arabia, they have a big role in OPEC, inside OPEC. Oman can play a big role on this. We did before, and we will be more than happy to continue to try and to bring everybody's back to the table.
Is there more on the table here? And I know, Ali, it's beyond your sort of area of expertise, but ultimately there's a lot of issues, it would appear, in the region that are causing divisions between countries. Is that part of this, or is this just, do you think, locked in the OPEC space?
No, I think everything is it is linked. It is so many uncertainties between us, the GCC countries at the moment. We are facing one of those very critical moments for our GCCs. Coordination and cooperations. So it is part of that. I think it is going to be resolved, I hope, by the leaders. They are very wise leaders. We have, alhamdulillah, thank God that we have a very wise leaders. And I don't think they will allow the coordination between the countries to collapse. There will be some solutions. We have seen already United States of America, they have started sending some indication of interference. So we hope that things are going to get better. I hope before we break for the Eid holidays. Let's just hope that things will go back again. I'm not worried about the political arena, but I'm worried about the OPEC Plus agreement. That is our bread and butter in the region here, and we don't want to see it collapse.
Matt, ultimately, there's a few things at stake here. One is the market structure, obviously, but the other is, as you pointed to earlier, the credibility that OPEC Plus had achieved over the last year, much to everybody's surprise, that they'd held it all together, not only held it together, but incredibly disciplined, and had really taken a grip of the market again. And now we're seeing the sort of dirty laundry, if you like, out in public, and the fractures and that confidence. Maybe it's hard to put that genie back in the bottle, regardless of where this goes.
Well, I think the survey question's excellent today because I think, you know, it's such a sensitive issue, and I agree with Ali that, you know, the leadership has been faultless, and discipline has been faultless too. But you wonder if someone's given an inch, they will take a mile. So if we refer to laggards against the cut last year was Iraq. Now, if they see that there's any fracturing in the agreement, they're so reliant fiscal budget wise on revenues, and they are ready to open up the taps. You just wonder if, okay, well, look, there's a possible disruption to the agreement. You wonder if someone will take advantage of that and just say the world needs more oil. We haven't come to an agreement, and they may take it upon themselves to say we were going to increase production. So it's going to be really key to see if there is no agreement, then the discipline for, you know, the producers, how much will they increase production? Because the world needs more oil, and we can't get to a point where we get to $100 a barrel just based on the fact that supply is being curtailed. So
well,
you may see
on that point, Matt, just to interject, is there any other issues we're not paying attention to, given this? Obviously, we're all distracted by this particular story, but demand in the context of the rising COVID variant Delta, as it's called, is making big disruptions around the world. And from a demand point of view, it could have an impact given the amount of lockdowns and shut-ins of different types that we're seeing. Any other stories out there that you think we need to keep an eye on?
Well, I think the Saudi tariff story is one that I think a lot of people really need to keep an eye on. That is, it's a very, very sensitive subject. There's been... I saw
Reuters published a story about the Saudis imposing tariffs on the...
Correct. Yeah, and it's not, you know, we live in the oil world. Margins are thin. They always are. There was, you know, hover between 1% and 2%. If you're making money there, you're happy. We're talking a 25% tariff. And, you know, the setup that Aramco have, you know, they've got a downstream sector now. They've got a very active trading division. They've got a new refinery coming on board, and they are one of the biggest end user of fuel oil for power generation during the summer months for air conditioning. So the setup that they have, will it affect where they buy oil from, right? And I'm trying to skirt around this issue as carefully as I can. You know, I don't do tax.
When you say oil, do you mean fuel oil?
End user products, whether that's, you know, they've got a lot of oil, as we know, but yeah, the heavy fuel oil that they use for power generation,
right?
You know, Aramco are very active in Fujairah, and if it's this GCC tariff for imports into Saudi, and Fujairah is part of that, then it's gonna shift the needle on a lot of arbitrage opportunities that people look at. And you know, they've just set up their own bunkering operation in Yanbu. Arguably, they should have perhaps done this a few years ago, but they're really now starting to flex their muscles and look at surrounding ports, regions, whether that's Sohar, Djibouti, and of course Fujairah, and saying, you know what, we've got our own chips and we've got our own requirements, and we're going to do this ourselves. So I think a lot of people are looking through the OPEC agreement, and that might be the sort of conduit to really talk about other issues that are coming to the surface.
Well, perhaps without getting too sort of hyperbolic on it, and the sharp elbows of the post, you know, the peak demand oil era that we are entering into, that perhaps these are all elements of its birth that we may have to get more familiar with. Let's give Kevin the last word this morning, as it is top of the hour, and get the survey result first. So do you expect the unilateral production increase? Yes, but not by a big margin. Still 45% of our room thinks people will be disciplined. Kevin, your thoughts on the rest of the week, where this goes?
We're obviously in a very interesting situation. The whole OPEC plus, everyone's watching it. That's directing price, it's directing volatility. People are going to keep looking at that until something happens. As Ali said earlier, you know, something has to be resolved. There has to be a solution to the impasse, because it doesn't create the stability that the world depends on. But I think, you know, the other thing that you've got to keep looking at, as Matt mentioned earlier, is EIA stats. Are we seeing the recovery in driving miles in the US over the July 4th weekend? and therefore are we starting to see a sort of a positive sign for the second half? And that's what I think, you know, the attention will be on.
Okay, well, that seems to be like a place to wrap up. My 2 pennies worth is that I don't see any great urgency at the moment. The market isn't screaming urgency. It's still kind of hovering in the mid 70s. The main actors of OPEC Plus don't seem to be too concerned at this moment. So I wouldn't be expecting any white smoke to come ahead of Eid. It would be my 2 pennies worth. We have a great interview this week with the director of Fujairah Oil Industry Zone. Some of the points that Matt just made there, worth a listen to when you have 20 minutes. Thanks, everybody. Thanks again, Ali Alriyami, for joining us this morning. Really appreciate you coming on to the roster of our commentators, and we look forward to having you back soon again. Matt, as well, as always, great to have you. Kevin in Singapore, take care, and we'll join everybody in the coming days. All the best. Thank you.
See you.
Thank you.